This is Our Side of Addiction, the podcast. I'm Amanda Bork. Let's go. Hello, I'm here. Amanda here. Welcome. On this episode, let's touch on early recovery, particularly the first 90 days. What exactly does that look like? What can you expect? What are they experiencing? Your loved one with the addiction, how is that for them? I love this topic because my sister, Jenna, she was an addict for, over a decade, well over a decade. She used heroin and then progressed to fentanyl. Never really took recovery or treatment seriously, but I didn't know that until far later when I was reflecting. There was one particular time where she was in the 12-step program and she was declaring, I want step 4, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, wow, step 4 out of 12, that's great. And I went online and I looked at what are the 12 steps and what's step number 4. And I realized she never made amends with me. She never had a conversation with me. And that's part of what she was supposed to have been doing. I felt insulted. I felt angry because I had uprooted my life in another country, had come back to the US for her because she said she had a problem with addiction. I had been living a horrible life in the US, not wanting to be here and sacrificing for her, trying my best for her, being emotionally drained and exhausted for her. And she didn't make amends with me. Like, she didn't see that I did any of that. She didn't appreciate any of that. That I flew from another country and relocated for her. She can't have a conversation or write a letter. I was pissed. And you could tell right now. I was pissed. I'm still pissed. She's lucky she's dead because I would be beating her up again. But we can take this a little personally sometimes. How can we not? That's why I love this conversation, because as the family members of addicts, it's really important for us to know what's going on. It's very easy to feel like an outsider, as though we're not allowed to be included in this, and we're just in the dark. We never really know what's going on, and it's frustrating for us on our side. I facilitate meetings at a rehab, so I'm also privy to the firsthand experience of rehab from them. Well, I guess that wouldn't be firsthand. What is that? Second hand? Third hand? One of the hands. I'm in there, guys. I have a hand in there. I see their struggles. I hear what their issues are. I hear what their frustrations are. And I also see their processes, which is a great asset because I know the family side, but I also have some kind of a hand in the recovery side. So I'm in there with them. For us, the family, it can feel like we're walking on glass, walking on them eggshells, because we don't want to even breathe on them. We don't want them to move because we're kind of been disappointed before. We've been heartbroken. We've been through the cycle of recovery, relapse, them asking us for help, us getting them help, them refusing. It's such a delicate situation for us, And it feels very fragile. It is fragile. I will tell you that your sentiments are valid and realistic. It is fragile. A lot of people don't make it 90 days in rehab. There are a lot of frustrating factors of it. And then on the other end, it does feel like a relief. It does feel like I can let out a sigh through the corner of my mouth with my head turned away from them because, oh my God, they're in recovery. They're in treatment. Maybe you even think it's finally over. This experience of active addiction. You're happy, you're relieved, they're safe, you know where they are, they're being monitored, they're getting help. But there's that creepy creep coming in. What if it falls apart? What if they relapse? What if they don't make it 90 days? What if they check themselves out because they're having a little tiffy that day and they decide, fuck it, I'm leaving? What if? We're feeling so many emotions in this experience that it leaves us like in this weird limbo where we don't really want to extend in one direction. I want to stay neutral because there are so many factors and so many things that can happen right now. Let's just stay right here. Not get excited, but not make a peep. I'm not moving. You might also be asking yourself other questions about you. Why do you continue to be so emotional? Why does it still feel hard? You still feel resentment or anger. You still feel unsettled. Why aren't things better? We have this fantasy in our head that as soon as they go to rehab, it'll all go away. All of your pain, all of these sentiments, your anxiety, your sleepless nights, it'll all fade away. And that's that hopeful aspect of us, which is good that we have. Yet, the reality is that it's not going to go away for a while. Even if your loved one is 2 years sober, you still could be processing emotions. You still might be having some feelings about it. You might be angry, like the story I just shared with you. Like, what the heck? You didn't come to me. We might still be emotionally invested in this because it's still very current. And the wound that we receive by loving an addict, it's not healed. We think it'll magically be healed once they're in recovery. It's not. It's not even stitched up at that point. The healing process is very long and drawn out for us. And another state of contention with that is the addict tends to heal and move on faster than the family does, which really stinks, and it's not fair because they wounded you. Why do they get to move on faster? It's just the reality of it. They'll appear to be happy, to rebuild their lives, to be moving on, productive, volunteering, going to meetings, and you still feel the same. That's another hard bit about their recovery process is yours is so delayed and it's really not fair, but it's just how it is. Let's focus on what recovery looks like for our loved ones. For us, it can be confusing to look in. The inside is very overwhelming and very confronting. They are in this intense environment and they are overloaded with meetings and groups and therapy and skills, so much more. But they're also having to dive deep within themselves to uncover, unearth the root of the addiction. Many people might enjoy the sentiment that I was born an addict, I was always going to be an addict, da da da. The truth of the matter is the addiction stemmed from environmental stimulus. Something happened in the environment that caused the addiction. Could have been a one-time event, and it could have also been prolonged. You might not consider it traumatic, they might. Trauma is very subjective and depends on the person. It comes from a place of pain and hurt and uncomfortability. They have to dredge that up and confront that. It's a very painful process, and sometimes people are in denial. I'll have people in my groups and they'll say, well, my childhood wasn't really that bad. 2 weeks later, they share a story about their childhood and my jaw is on the floor. Like, are you kidding me? That is horrible. Do you remember 2 weeks ago when you said it wasn't that bad? Do you think this is not bad? They're having to come to some realizations about things. And they're also jammed in rooms elbow to elbow with people. They don't have any physical space either. They're annoyed at themselves, they're frustrated and overwhelmed, dredging up childhoods and coming to realizations, and then somebody beside them is breathing like a heavy pig, or someone didn't brush their teeth, or someone's taken off their shoes. Like, it's a lot. A very compressed environment. So they're overwhelmed. They're also anxious. They also have a huge amount of shame and guilt. Guilt and shame are some of the most frequently experienced emotions for our addicts when they're in recovery, particularly those early stages. And I see it most prevalently when someone is in the program, leaves, relapses, and comes back to the program. They won't even make eye contact. They'll sit all the way in the back of the room, head down, completely avoiding the gaze. They know they screwed up. They feel like the worst person on earth. And I always try to just disarm that because it just happened. Let's move on. Like, dwelling on that, being guilty and ashamed, just keeps us stuck right there. We can't move with those emotions. But that's what they're experiencing. There's also uncertainty. A lot of them don't know where they're going to live in a few months. They don't have a plan. They don't actually even know how to live life sober. Say they started using substances. I'm going to say this number and it's going to sound very low, but it happens. 10 years old to 14 is usually that sweet spot where most people are starting to use. They've never developed themselves. They've never been an adult who's sober. They don't know what it's like to manage emotions. They don't know what it's like to be a productive member of society. They're having to figure all of this stuff out in a very short period of time. You and I, we've had a lot of practice, and it was gradual. We were teenagers, then we were early adults, and then it just keeps progressing. We've had a lot of time to practice. They've had no time. And it's compressed into a few months or a year or two. And that's part of the frustration for them. And sometimes I hear, oh, well, I'm so old, I should know this stuff by now. It gets frustrating for them. But if they didn't have time to practice or they weren't even taught these skills, we can't expect them to just know it. And we can't expect them to be skilled at it either. A lot of rehabs will initially give people medications to help them detox safely, because sometimes it's very dangerous. And also, the medications are beneficial because if you've ever seen someone detox just cold, my sister Jenna, she did that twice at my house, and I gotta say, -10 experience. Would not recommend to anyone ever. Leave that to the professionals. It's horrifying. They are ill. They feel like their skin is peeling off, or they want to wiggle out of their skin. They are sick to their stomachs. They maybe have these twitches on their body where they can't stop moving. What's it called? Restless leg syndrome is big with opioid detox. There's all kinds of ailments. They're just in agonizing pain for several weeks unless they're tapered off using medications. And because recovery treatment centers are so quick and compact, there's no time to have them come off without medical assistance, because you're talking about 3 weeks of time where they're in fetal position in agonizing pain. That's 3 weeks that could have been used to practice skills or be sitting in meetings or working on relationships, going to therapy. It's good to seize the most amount of time, maximize our time. And that is always usually going to be an element, some medical assistance. And even there's reserve about that within the rehab. Some of them think, well, I'm on this medicine, I'm not even sober. And that can be a little sense of contention for them, where they feel guilty for even tapering off or detoxing using medical assistance. That's a conflict for them internally. They're like, well, so when is my sober date? Because I'm still on drugs. It's just the difference is a doctor gave it to me, but I still feel more high than a street drug. There's a lot that they're trying to conceptualize or actualize for themselves. And there's an immense amount of things that are floating around in their heads. And their body's just trying to figure out, it's trying to get its legs back, the body. Mood swings are extremely common, especially that first several months, like 90 days. And we can be unprepared for that as family. How quickly their mood shifts. I've seen huge mood swings in groups. Huge. Near fist fights in those groups. And they're irritable. They're under a lot of stress, and there's a lot of stuff surfacing and happening. And they also don't have the physical space. I think that adds a little bit of pressure to the environment, that they're physically so close to one another, usually sleeping in the same rooms, and they just never get that space even alone. Along with irritability, there's sadness, sudden sadness, spikes of anxiety, defensiveness is big, emotional numbness or disassociation. Also, some people are overconfident when they're in there. Oh, I know everything. Oh, I'm so educated. I have a such and such IQ, or no. Whenever people like that come into the group shuts that down very quickly. You don't know nothing. You're in here right next to me with a 20 IQ, brother. So, but there is that overconfidence. Kind of like I shared on a previous episode, Jenna kind of saying to me, I don't need to go to rehab because I already know everything they're going to say. It's like, okay, it's the same thing. But what happens is that overconfidence can be quickly followed up by despair and extreme despair. Our emotional regulation is going to be one of the slower things to recover when we're in sobriety or in recovery, partially because they don't have any experience or practice regulating their emotions on their own. They don't have any skills around that. But also just because, from a physiological standpoint, to repair that emotional state, the nervous system, there's a lot of things that have to come into alignment for that to take place. And drugs, substances, they really just allow or enable a person to disconnect from their emotional state. They're not used to feeling anxiety. Or when they did feel anxiety, they would just take their substance and that's how they managed it. So they're not used to even sitting in it to know what to do with it. It's a jarring experience. And what happens is that emotional experience, these states of emotion, tend to flood back in and tend to overwhelm the person, not only because they're not used to feeling the feelings, but because it's going to be intense when all of the feelings flood them. It's like they were just put in the bank collecting interest and they flood back during recovery. I touched a little bit on some withdrawal symptoms and the benefit of medical assistance. I want to add to that addicts can still experience withdrawal symptoms even though they're on the medications. It's less severe, but it still can occur. And we can expect that some of these symptoms can go several months. And if we're talking about what to expect from our addicts in the first 90 days of recovery, even if they're on medicine, they'll still be experiencing some symptoms. What does that include? We talked about this, mood swings, low motivation, brain fog, sleep disturbances. That could also include nightmares or really weird, vivid dreams, anxiety, depression, and an overall difficulty of handling any kind of stress. It can last weeks, but it can also last months. Some research has suggested that these symptoms linger for so long because the brain chemistry is changing. The brain changes during addiction, and it's also trying to revert or heal after addiction or during sobriety. And those changes can be or are linked to some of those withdrawal symptoms. It's not that they have a bad attitude or they're not putting in enough effort. If they're having mood swings or low motivation, it's not always that. It's how can you really tell? We can't, but we have to factor in the element of physiologically they're having mood swings that they can't control, or they're having low motivation that they can't control. They just feel like that. Similar to maybe if you've ever experienced depression, you don't want that. You don't want to feel like you can't leave the bed, but you just feel like that. And that's also part of what they're experiencing, part of their struggles while they're in there. How does this impact our relationships? Whatever type of relationship you have with your addict, whether that's sibling, spouse, parental, is going to have an impact. Their addiction impacted you, and their recovery is also going to impact you. You might feel this tendency to maintain that hypervigilance. You want to make sure they stay sober. You want to police whether or not they're doing the right thing and maintaining their routines. Part of that is good, but not extreme. We want to balance it because we don't want to be ignorant if they are slipping or relapse. This spectrum, and we want to kind of fade. We want to home base in the center, but we can fade in and out to either end of it. Maybe we're feeling afraid to speak openly and honestly. And it also could be the converse. Speaking too openly and honestly, or wanting to offload too much of our stuff onto them right away. Because we want to hurry up and resolve it. We still feel horrible even though we're 90 days into sobriety. And we want to quickly offload it because I was not supposed to still feel like this. However, I will say it's not the time. The time to have those kind of conversations, minimum, I would say 6 months in. They're still trying to figure out their parts of it. By us offloading onto them during this delicate time, it just makes the situation worse for them. I get the desire to want to do that, but we as family members suffer a big load by loving them, and we do have to suffer into their recovery. Perhaps you're unsure of what's allowed, what's not allowed. You could be afraid of triggering a relapse. There's a lot that goes on. And while all this is going on with you, your loved one could feel defensive. They could get defensive very quickly. They might feel ashamed. They might feel scrutinized. And they're definitely going to be overwhelmed by expectations. We feel as though recovery is the end of addiction. It's all over. And they might sense that and feel overwhelmed by that because for them, it's never going to be an end to addiction. This is a new chapter in their journey. This is their sober journey. But the addiction is always going to be a factor that's a possibility. Red flags versus when someone's just trying to adjust. It's good that we're vigilant and we are taking note of them. We don't want to be in denial. We also don't want to be overly inserting in their lives. How do we actually know when this is good space for them to just adjust or when this is possibly a red flag? When we're early in recovery, like 90 days, we should expect that they're going to be fatigued. We should expect that they are going to be emotionally sensitive, that there will be mood swings. We should expect that they want space, and they might want a lot of space from you. I'm not sure. It depends on them. They might react strongly to stress because they're sensitive to it, sensitive to emotions just in general. They absolutely need structure and routine, and they do need to feel as though they are part of something more than themselves. That's the biggest reason why the 12 steps advocates for a higher power. You don't have to be religious, but they advocate that you do need a higher power, something more than yourself and connected to more than just yourself. Beyond that, there's this huge element of community, and that's also ties into feeling connected to something more than yourself, connected to others, being part of a group or a unit. Just feeling like they have a purpose or a mission in general is what they really need and thrive on. Red flags. Whenever I say that, I think about that guy on YouTube. He's like the red flag guy or green flag guy. I don't know. I've only come across him a couple times. It's quite funny. He has flags and he'll run around with either red or green flag while responding to a video, usually of someone in a relationship or a couple's video or something. But he's stuck in my head. He's just ruined red flags for me because I visualize him running in a field with a flag every time someone says that word. But with our addicts, what are some of those red flags? The first thing I would always look for would be skipping out on support or skipping meetings if they're in a 12-step or some other treatment styles or programs. They do run meetings. If they're tapering off the meetings, that's a red flag because they're lessening their commitment to sobriety. Maybe they too would like to convince themselves that it's all over. They don't need to be vigilant anymore. They don't need to continue putting effort into this anymore. And that's wrong. We have to understand that addiction is lifelong and they will always have to put in effort. They also have to understand the same thing. If they're retracting on their commitment, their investment in sobriety, big red flag. And what's tricky about this is they will have excuses, and their excuses will be valid. I'm sick. I'm tired. I have a migraine. I've done so much overtime. My feet hurt. Like I cannot go anywhere. I just have to be home tonight. Oh, I did an online meeting, but you didn't witness it, and suddenly they prefer online meetings and exclusively claim to go to online only meetings. I'm not saying to just assume they're liars, but I will say they have lied a lot and will continue to lie a lot. Our trust is not there yet. I would always assume that they're lying just because we haven't reestablished our trust yet. And you will agree with their sentiments. You're right. You have gone to 4 meetings this week. Who cares if you skip one? Like, what's the big deal? You can go to one tomorrow instead. You have been working 12-hour shifts. Of course you need to sleep in. Is there anything I can get you? You want us to order pizza? Oh my God, you have another migraine. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just stay in this room, keep it dark, and relax. It will sound valid, but that's the whole point. It's going to sound valid, and it's going to be an excuse that you're going to agree with. They know you're going to agree with it or empathize with it. Another red flag, isolating. Isolating could be from you, from friends, from their support system, from their sponsor, just in general. Isolation is very bad for addicts, and that tendency to isolate will eventually lead to a relapse. Sudden secrecy. You don't know where they're going anymore. I'm not saying to track their phone or anything, but going back, our trust has not been rebuilt, and I'm going to assume that you're lying or you're keeping something from me. This sudden secrecy is usually for a reason, and it's a red flag. Increased defensiveness, especially around accountability or responsibilities. They're going to get very defensive very fast. It might be aggressive, might not. Some people are very smooth talkers and they'll grease the wheels like that, and other people will intimidate you and rush you and get you to shut up like that. If there's this defensiveness that feels like it's unwarranted or overreactive, that's a red flag. Replacing substances with other risky behaviors. Substances are linked to other types of behaviors. For some people, getting high and having sex with random strangers is part of the ritual around addiction and substance use. It could be that if they're sober, they just hook up with a random stranger and have sex because those behaviors are linked to one another in the ritual of using. That could ultimately lead to a relapse. It's suggested, highly suggested, that people who are sober don't have any relationship, including sexual encounters, for the first year. And some people are like, oh my God, that's so much time. Be like a virgin again. A year. It's for a reason. A lot of people have those two things intertwined. And also there's this emotional manipulation factor. There could be codependency issues. It gets very murky. And for that reason, it's best for them to not engage. But if we are witnessing them engaging in risky behaviors, of course that's going to be unique to your loved one, how you would define that and what that might look like for them. But just being aware of that. Any kind of extremism, because what they're trying to do is get that dopamine hit by using this extremism to mimic the experience of substance use or get as close to it as possible. That's why addicts, their dopamine regulation is, dysregulated, but regulation is dysregulated for a while because they live such an extreme lifestyle and their reward system was deeply tied into that and drove the addictive behaviors. They were extremely rewarded for the extreme behavior. They might try to mimic that so they can get that dopamine hit. It's just that for that first, I'd say year and a half, normal activities are going to feel very boring and vanilla for them because they're not going to receive a dopamine response the way maybe you and I would receive it, since it's dysregulated and hasn't gone back to its normal state. Also, romanticizing past usage. Romanticizing can look a little different depending on the person. And what's tricky about that is maybe they're just sharing a story with you and you feel like, oh, they're opening up, they're letting me in, they're telling me these secrets. At the same time, The real goal of that is to fantasize or relive that and share that with a person in the present. It could be just sharing a story, but it could also be them trying to seek out the reliving of the story. We really want to try to only use the reliving of the stories as a strategy in response to triggers so that they can replay the bad things, and they can replay, well, if I used this would happen, then that would happen. Boom, I'd be back on the streets. I'd have to restart treatment. That's mostly what we try to use the storytelling for. So when we're storytelling in other contexts, it could be them just reliving or trying to feel something like that again. Another thing to note is just because someone had a bad day doesn't mean they're at risk for relapse or it's a red flag day. We're allowed to have off days or even weeks, but rather we want to notice the patterns more than just anything else. Is this consistently a pattern of change? Us as family members, how can we maintain realistic expectations? This is tricky for us. As I said in the beginning, there's this spectrum for us where we feel hopeful, but we feel scared. We want to be excited, but what if they relapse? I don't want to breathe on them or say the wrong thing to them, because what if they're going to quit rehab over it or they relapse over it? We feel a lot of emotions during this, and we also carry this expectation, again, that rehab is the end point for addiction. I used to think that all the time when Jenna was alive. If I could just get her into rehab, all my pain will be gone. I can pack up my stuff in the US and I can go back to, I was living in India. I can go back to India and continue my beautiful life. And it'll just be this little blip in time, and I'll eventually forget all of this ever happened. That was my goal, and I was obsessed with just getting her into rehab so I can breathe and I can be done with it. That's a normal expectation for us, I will say, but it's not realistic. And it's this misunderstanding that addiction is short term when we know addiction is long term, lifelong term. You're not wrong for having these hopes or expectations. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course you want this all to be over and done with. Yet, a part of it will never, ever be. Ever. People relapse after 30 years of sobriety. Not something you want to hear right now, but it's the truth regardless. 30 years sober, relapse. 20 years, relapse. 10 years, relapse. 10 years sober, working in the sober industry, relapse. It's lifelong. How can we hold and maintain realistic expectations? Well, we want to fixate on this 90 days because that's what this episode is about. This short, newly recovered. What kind of expectations should we have? They're not going to be emotionally mature. Just boom, 90 days. I'm fixed. I can handle my emotions. No, they're not going to be emotionally mature. Your trust is not going to be repaired or even rebuilt 90 days in. Communication is not going to be perfect, might not even be that great. Especially because I don't want us, the family, to offload anything onto them at all in the first 6 months. There's no dense conversations about your feelings and your experience for that first 6 months. because they're managing enough right now. They don't need anything else. We can also not expect for them to have a complete overhaul, especially of their personality, because their personality changed during addiction. We might hope that after they've gotten treatment, their personality of before will return. Might not ever return, but I know it's not going to return after 90 days. They don't even know who they are. The first year in sobriety, they're trying to figure it out. We can't expect any kind of overhaul in 90 days at all. What kind of expectations should we have? What kind of grace and openness should we be giving them? The number one is that they're learning new skills. They're learning new coping skills. How do I manage? How do I move? How do I communicate? Who am I? They're learning all these skills: breathing, meditation, emotional management. They're trying to figure out what works for them, what doesn't, which situations are good for which skills. Because I give this example in my group one day. I said, if we are in the middle of an argument and we're fuming, our veins are just pulsating, journaling is probably not going to be our thing. Right? Like, you're not going to sit down to a journal and write about your feelings. It's not going to work. Instead, walk away, do some breathing. Also, meditation is not going to work in that case either. You're not going to be able to settle yourself or your mind to meditate. It's them figuring out what works under what circumstances. And it's practice. They have to be in the situations and several times so they can practice several techniques and figure out what they like, what's working for them. It's a very personal journey, because not everything is going to work for everyone. And they're trying to figure that out. So we can expect them to be a little varied in their approaches or responses to things, because they're testing. So we want to give them the space and the grace to figure that out on their own, and be patient and kind with them while they're trying to figure that out. They're also building tolerance for this discomfort, so we can expect that. A change in their tolerance, we want to expect that change to be increased tolerance. We're not the best every day, but they're going to start practicing sitting in that discomfort. They're also, we can expect them to be imperfect. We can expect that. Them to fumble a lot, not be their best, fall back, fall down, whatever that is, however that looks like. And sometimes falling down means relapsing. I'm not saying expect relapse, but I am saying 92% of opioid users relapse in the first year. 92%. I think sometimes it's even higher than that. Alcohol's 86%, something like that. There's a high relapse rate. We can expect that maybe it's not going to work on the first, second, third, 20th try. Giving them that space and grace, again, to figure that out for themselves, and being supportive of that. It's really important that as family members, we expect that they're trying to figure it out and not assume that rehab is the end all be all. That first 90 days, it doesn't feel like much has moved for us on the outside. And even for our addicts, they also feel like not much has changed, or they haven't made as much progress as they hope or want. What we know about change and progress elevation is it happens internally first, and then it's going to be reflected externally. What's the timeline on that? We don't know. And I'm sure you've experienced that. Any kind of change you try to make in your life, you have to put in the effort up front before you're going to see any kind of result on the back end. Once you start seeing the result, it snowballs. But getting to that external result takes a little while, takes a little patience, and there's going to be frustration as well during that journey. We should expect that of our loved ones. We're not going to see magically a different person in front of us after 90 days. We can expect that most of the work that they're doing is internal work that will eventually be represented externally. What are some misconceptions that we have, the family members? I did mention the number one. Now that they're sober, everything should be better. That's the number one. I wish that was the case for us, but it's not. But most of us feel like that. While sobriety, recovery, is going to help remove the substance, it doesn't remove the trauma, the root causes, any unaddressed issues, or even consequences. I know some people I'll tell a story about my sister, Jenna. She got in trouble with the police, and she was in front of the judge, and I didn't know any of this was happening, but I heard the story after she died. Everyone was supporting her at court, trying to defend her, giving her, what is that called? Writing character statements, something like that. Trying to ensure that she doesn't get put away. And they said, oh, well, she went to rehab and she's better now and she's on track, yada, yada, yada. She ended up, I'm not sure, but somehow getting more leniency on that because of these character witnesses, because she went to rehab, because she's better now. Well, guess what? The situation didn't change. It was all just a show. It's all just, hey, they went to rehab. The problem's all over. They don't need to face any consequences. Wink, wink. And we can feel like, of course, jumping to our loved one's defense, and maybe they genuinely went to rehab and you don't feel like they deserve any consequences now that they've gotten sober. I would completely disagree with that. Our consequences aren't something that we face immediately after. Sometimes those consequences take a while to catch up, but it doesn't matter. You still have to face it. If someone committed murder 30 years ago and we have this new technology and we track them down and we arrest them, what are we supposed to say? Oh, well, it was 30 years ago. Like, look at him now. He's got a wife and kids. Let's let him go. No, you would not. If you were the family, you definitely would not. Hell no. What you did is what you did, and you pay. Whether you pay in now or you pay in 50 years, but you pay. I argue that it's the same with addicts and their consequences. Even if it's after rehab, they still need to fess up and face up. Because what happens is sometimes an addict will only go to rehab for the show, like Jenna did. She knew that was coming down the line. So she went to rehab to make it look good. And it's not genuine recovery. It's for show. It's to get out of the consequences. all of those things are still there, particularly after that first 90 days. That trauma still exists. We can't get over trauma in 90 days. Gosh, people spend their lives trying to get over their childhoods. We can expect that to be there still. The other misconception is if they're struggling, that means recovery isn't working. Struggle is part of the process. It's part of the effort that we have to invest. It's also part of healing. We have to struggle. We have to dig in. We have to face ourselves in the mirror. We have to really ask ourselves, how badly do I want this? Do I even want it on the bad days? Do I want it on the days that I just have nothing in me? Am I still willing to put in the effort? We're all going to struggle, but that's not an indication that recovery isn't working, or that's also not an indication of a red flag. The other misconception is if I say the wrong thing, I will cause a relapse. This is a little delicate. I don't believe anything you say can cause a relapse. I don't believe that. However, I will say family offload too early onto their addicts. They offload even when their addicts are in recovery for the first 30 days. It's uncalled for. It's unnecessary. I understand the sentiment, and we do need a place to offload, but that's our responsibility to find our place, not to offload on who we believe the source to be, but offload in the most constructive way in constructive places. It's not with your addict in the first 6 months. It causes additional stress and strain for them. They don't need it. It often, what can happen is our loved one is having a bad day. They're stressed. Maybe they got fired. They got in an argument with somebody. They're just frustrated because those internal changes haven't yielded any external results. And that's frustrating. And they're kind of at a little effort place. That's going to be the day you decide to offload your strain onto them. And that's going to be the breaking point. And they're going to run off and use. Were you the cause of that? No, because it's always their responsibility to manage themselves, regulate themselves. I will say, are you a contributing factor? Yeah. It's not about necessarily saying the wrong thing. It's about knowing when's our moment and when it's not. Where's our spot and where is it not? You can't individually cause a relapse, but you absolutely can contribute to one. Absolutely. Let's see. The last Yes, the last misconception I have is I have to protect them from stress. That kind of ties into what we just said. I don't want us to shield them or protect them from stress because they have to learn how to manage that. It's part of life. We all feel it and we all have to find our way through it. However, overly injecting ourselves into their lives and trying to micromanage them is not going to be helpful for them. Yes, keep certain things at bay. What you can control, keep it at bay. If they don't need to learn about something, just don't share it. But if they have to learn about something, then share it. Like, imperative that they know, okay, then share it. There's a little bit of nuance there because we don't want to overly offload, but then also we don't want to overly shield. What I always suggest is to allow a semi less than normal level of stress if we can control it, just to help them get that exposure to stress. But definitely nothing on your end. Don't, that's a no go. Your emotions, your anger, you did this to me, you didn't make amends with me, and no, I'm so stressed, and this, none of that for the first 6 months. That's not an element of semi-normal stress levels. I'm talking regular life type of stress and pressure. What are some things that actually are going to help our loved one in the first 90 days? The more awareness we bring to ourselves and the more we are able to elevate ourselves and process on our journey of this experience, the more beneficial we are going to be to ourselves, to our family, but also to our addicts. How predictable can we be? Because that's the foundation for successful sobriety, is predictability and routine. Can we become super predictable and stable? Can we have clear boundaries? We don't have to be going overboard starting fights with people, but can we have clear, concise boundaries? In what ways can we encourage structure and routine for them? Part of that is us having our predictability, our structure and routine that helps model. But in what ways can we facilitate or assist that for them? Can you sit down together and draft a routine? And can you even guise it as you also want to enhance your routines and structure, and maybe you want their input on it, how you can structure your day, and see if they have any feedback for you. We want to collaborate as much as possible. And that's also an opportunity to start building back your trust and your relationship with them, is by including each other in the process of advancement. They have their journey, you have yours, and they're separate journeys. I want to highlight that. Your journey is separate from theirs, and you do have a journey. There are opportunities for us to come together and be of assistance and collaborate together. And that's one of them. We can support their treatment and support their groups. Encourage them to go to their groups. I know sometimes it's easy to just say, oh, I would love to just sit down and watch a movie together. Look at this movie that I saw. Remember this? Can you just skip the meeting tonight and go tomorrow instead? There's a tendency for that, and I get it. They need to go to those meetings. It is a lifeline. They have to be going to those meetings, especially if they're in a 12-step program. It's not optional. That's part of the process, is going to the meetings. We can sometimes think, say after 90 days they do get out and they're reintegrating into life, we might think it's over. Meetings are their maintenance. Meetings are the way that they maintain progress. Even though it might be nice for them to skip a meeting and watch a movie together, it's counterproductive. It's not going to be helpful in the long run. Something else I want to tell you about meetings, and this is through trial and error. Do not go to their meetings. Do not ask them to go to their meetings. Do not force yourself into a meeting. Don't make them feel guilty because you're not invited to a meeting. I'll tell you a story about Jenna. I don't even know how it happened, but I think our mother and we felt a little excluded from Jenna's process, what was happening with her and her addiction and meetings, and we didn't know how to support her. And we thought the best way to support her is to go to a 12-step meeting with her and show her, as well as everyone else in that room, that we were on her team. She had support, she had love, and we were down for that girl. And we wanted to just announce that to the room. It's good intention. However, I don't remember if we insisted on going or we suggested on going. I really don't remember how it happened, but we went to the meeting and Jenna was very uncomfortable during that meeting. I saw her. She was just slumped in that chair like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. I often ignored a lot of her feelings because she was very much babied and shielded, and I felt it was my responsibility to do the opposite, and I didn't want to baby her, and I was kind of disgusted that she was so babied, and because of that, I was pretty harsh on her most of the time. Even though I saw her and how uncomfortable she was, I didn't care because I wanted to be at the meeting. I thought that's how I could show support for her. Anyways, we went to the meeting. Our mother and I were like, yeah, we're so excited. We support her. We love her. We were just energized after it because we felt like we did a good thing. Years later, I'm running a group in rehab, and someone brings up the fact that they hate when their family tries to come to meetings, group meetings. And the whole room agreed. Vocally, very loudly agreed. Everyone was chiming in on that sentiment. Very passionate chiming in. It's awful. Why do they go? It's my space. They're always inserting themselves. I can't relax when they're there. They took that time away from me. It wasn't even about me. It was about them. They were going off. And that just got brought up organically. I was so ashamed. But I had been one of them. I had been a family member that inserted themselves into a group meeting. I thought I was doing the right thing. But it turns out we want to think about meetings as a therapy session. It would be atrocious to invite yourself to someone else's therapy session. Can you even imagine that? Someone saying, like, I want to go to therapy. You're going to bring me next time you go. I'm going. Like, it wasn't agreed to. It wasn't suggested. It was you inserting yourself into their therapy. And then you sitting in there and expecting your loved one to share their secrets while you're sitting right there. Okay, continue on with the session as normal. Pretend I'm not right here. Because I want to hear all your deep, dark secrets. I just want to see what y'all do in this therapy stuff. Don't mind me. It's exactly that. I didn't understand that while Jenna was alive, but you sure are going to understand that for your loved one. You're going to understand that their meetings are equivalent to a very personal and private therapy session. When you're there, they cannot share. They cannot converse how they usually would. They're not going to abstract any content as they usually would. They're not going to engage with people. They're going to disassociate and turn away from it. And there's going to be some resentment because you took that meeting from them. You made that meeting about you. And you took their time. We come from a good place, but we are confused. We are not in the loop. We are frustrated. We're isolated from this whole experience, especially on the recovery aspect of it. We don't know what's going on. And sometimes we force ourselves in there so that we can find out what's going on. And that's usually not going to be so productive, but we feel so removed and isolated. Like, if you don't tell me, I'm going in there myself. I will storm the castle. We want to give them the space to do meetings alone. And I don't ever want you going to a meeting with your loved one. Ever. Unless it's specifically a family meeting, a special event meeting, you are not going in there. And you're also not ever going to make them feel guilty for that. We're not doing manipulation or guilt trips or crying over it or saying that you're jealous over it. Whatever strategy we're trying to implement, we're not doing it anymore. That's their space, their time. That's number one thing. Let's continue on of what's not helpful. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, okay, wait. One more thing on what's helpful for family. It's us taking care of our mental health. That's imperative. We aren't going to be the best versions of ourselves when we aren't caring for ourselves. And I spoke about we have our journey in this. Part of our journey is going to be sorting out these emotions that we feel, this turmoil, this trauma of loving an addict, and the mental impact that has on us. That's part of our journey, and that's separate from theirs. Didn't want to skip that because our journey is important, and we do have a place in this, and I want to make sure we find our place. Going back, less helpful, not helpful, okay? We are not going to meetings. That's a no-go zone. That's like Area 51 to you. Or is it 51, Area 52? Y'all, I'm so out of it. Like, I never know my references. Area 51, I think. Okay. That's Area 51. You don't go there. Restricted. Also, less helpful. Overly monitoring them. I know there's this tendency to want to dig in and insert yourself and ensure that they're doing the right thing and preventing relapsing. That's disempowering them, taking away their responsibilities to themselves, and you're also telling them that you don't trust them. You don't have any faith in them. You have zero hope in them when we do that. Comes from a good place. I know your heart, but the execution and the receiving of that is not what you think it is. When we are overly invested in them emotionally, my day depends on them. How I feel depends on them. Whatever they do has the most monumental impact on me. Yes. How can it not feel like that? We want to pull ourselves back away from them a little bit, because in any healthy relationship, my whole emotional state does not depend on you. It shouldn't. I shouldn't put that on you, put that on expectation on our relationship. Making sure that we aren't overly invested emotionally, that also safeguards us. If they happen to relapse, our life is not going to go crumbling down. We're stabilized and secure, and we can respond from that stabilized place. Whereas if we're overly invested emotionally, we're not going to respond in a stabilized place. It just won't happen. Walking on eggshells around them. I do think there is this necessity, especially that first 90 days, to be a little eggshelly with them. I would say slight eggshells with that, but not too much. You want to start giving responsibilities back over to them. Don't dump it. We want to gradually reintroduce it or even introduce it. Another thing that's not helpful is suppressing your needs, our needs. We want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and we are addressing the needs that we have. Otherwise, we'll expect that other people are meant to fulfill that for us. And that could be offloading onto our addicts, thinking that they're supposed to fulfill a need or resolve something for us. It's just too much to be doing that in the first 90 days. That's why it's important that we address our needs appropriately. Yes, you are going to be exhausted in this whole experience. You're going to want to be optimistic, but are very cautious around that because you don't want to get your hopes dashed or your heart broken. And you're going to be this mixture of fear and hope. Both of those sides are going to reside within you. I want to be hopeful, but oh my God, I can't get my heart broken again. I can't face them relapsing again. So you brace yourself to protect yourself. And there's also this element of grief. We're grieving our loved one, grieving who they used to be, who they are as an addict, what's going to happen in the future. Will we have a relationship in the future? Will I like who they are now that they're sober? Or if they relapse, would I still like them? There's a lot of grief and uncertainty in this experience. And we're also recovering from the chaos, the brokenness, the bursting of trust, the trauma that we experienced by loving them. It's not over just because just because recovery has happened. It's the beginning of the process of healing. And it's a process. It's a rebuilding process. And it's not about our loved one returning to who they once were either. It's more so about them evolving into a new version of themselves. And us giving them the space to do that. And us also finding our way into evolving into a new version of ourselves. I call it leveling up. Just want to be leveling up who we are. And giving our loved ones the opportunity to also redefine who they are. Regardless of what you want, what you think, what you remember, letting them decide that for themselves. Yes, it's uncomfortable. There's going to be a lot of things you don't like. It's not going to be a straight line. There will be many setbacks. But that's growth. Growth can be very unstable, especially before it's fully integrated. We cannot expect that recovery is fully integrated in 90 days. We can't. Wrapping it up, putting a bow on it, and passing it over to you. This first 90 days of our loved one's recovery, it's going to feel like the same for you, and you're going to still have all these emotions that have been there. Our loved ones, maybe their progress is going to look slow. It's going to look flawed. And there might even be more bad days or hard days than good days. That's not a reflection as to whether or not we're successful in this 90 days. We want to give ourselves also the grace to be collected and respond in compassionate ways to them and their process and their journey. We want to support them without hovering over them, micromanaging them. And if you've ever had a job where the boss micromanaged you, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I will quit that same day they hired me if it's not doing that stuff on me. No one wants it. Nobody likes it. We're coming from this space of fear and we're injecting fear onto them when we behave like that. And they know that. Because you're hovering, you don't trust them. You don't have faith in them. And they receive that message of, they think I'm going to screw this up. They don't think I'm capable of this. And that's going to fester in their head. Of course, not too hands off where you're living in la la land, not really taking notice of anything. You want to be in neutral ground. We also want to protect yourself and try to manage the guilt and shame and anger as best as we can, finding our channels for that. It's not our loved one. It's separate from them, but making sure we have our safe spaces and we are managing our emotions responsibly. And staying grounded in reality. We have to make sure we're being vigilant in our awareness and reality. Making sure we have that awareness of ourselves, our actions, and our loved ones. And you know what? That's all I got for you today on this episode. Thanks for listening. We'll see each other again on the next one. See ya.